That's right. Welcome back, my friends, too. It's Actuali podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
My man, DJ. We are in the house. It's Meaning Making 101, our weekly live stream series. And thank you guys so much for returning once again. We've got a good one this evening. We're going to discuss truth management and manufacturing of consent. What are these terms? What do they mean? This is all about how governments, elites, corporations, power centers of all sorts manipulate the truth to maintain control. And hopefully we help build a little bit better of a firewall against all the BS that is out there as a result of this.
Yeah, well, it's everywhere. Everything that you see on the interwebs, on the TV, while you're driving down the road is some form of manufactured control over you that you give up to. You know, do you sign up for the whatever, free social media that you can use and give all your data away? Do you buy the products off of Amazon that are from not quite reputable places? Do you hate people for the sake of, you saw that on the media it was appropriate to hate them because you should be able to hate them because they're despicable people? Do you feel like the other guys are doing that? It's all manufactured control.
So as far as the management of our perceptions, the framing of reality is concerned, just to kick it off, we wanted to share this incredible supercut mashup of this crazy moment of mass propaganda that occurred. You've probably seen one of these before. Check this out.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
We are concerned about trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets.
This goes on, guys. Check this out. Check this out.
all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use
What?
platforms to push their own
What?
personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Oh my goodness.
Extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous to our democracy, guys. God forbid something like that should ever happen.
Yeah, well, other than the cadences being slightly different because everybody's different, like that news talk, the way people talk on the news, that's taught to them, like how to talk. So you can deliver the same thing, so you can read the same script, deliver it exactly the same way, so everybody hears it the same way all around the country.
Speaking the truth, my man.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. But it works though, because it sounds sure, and authoritative, and it's not too long ago that we were only consuming media via the radio, right? And every night the entire country would listen to the same guy who would talk. And then we got more and more channels, and then more and more channels owned by fewer and fewer entities.
Right.
And what happens when the corporate entities start merging with the government entities, and it's
Yeah, I remember, I think it was around the 1980s, there was over 50 different major corporations that controlled all the different kinds of media that were out there, news, radio, television. 20 years later, it was 5. And it continues to consolidate.
Yeah, well.
And we got new players in the game now. Social media is changing things. YouTube's changing things drastically. Rumble and the rest are coming in. X now coming up big time.
Well, and I've heard in the media too, this was the social media election, or the podcast election, or whatever they're saying now. Basically what they're saying, it's an admitting of a huge shift from the authoritative sources and the people that are on the main broadcasting lines and are taking up that space. Now they're dying off, and it's now just open to any schmo in his basement or the information off the phone or whatever. It's like, well, actually, the information off your phone and schmo in the basement is better.
Oftentimes, that guy might have quite a high level of expertise.
And particularly if you just, it's a lot easier to be skeptical of schmo in his basement. So it keeps you a little bit more honest with your relationship with the person giving you the news. They say, it's like, oh, well, do you believe your friend who had a hair salon, do you believe that? She posted that online, and do you believe her? That's just a person with her hair salon. And it's just like, well, if it is my friend, then it's like, okay, well, I do trust to a certain degree what they have to say, but I also realize that unless they're like citing something deep, it's just like, okay, it's my friend. Whereas the news.
But you're making a really valid point here, because we actually figure things out together. There's like kind of like a collective mind thing that happens. So in the town square, we're all talking about a different issue and we're working out the ins and outs of it. Everyone has different opposing viewpoints. So you have to come up with some way of creating conciliation, and trade-offs and compromises are made, and we get closer and closer, narrowing in, focusing in, using our opponent processing to figure out the best way for one and all to resolve whatever issue. And that's basically what we get to do now as the media, as we are now taking over the media. So there's a lot of people out there with, experience as journalists that have now started their own Substacks, their own YouTube channels. And then you've got people like ourselves that are out here learning along with all of you guys. And we, if anything, hopefully just do a really good job of tracking all that's going on the cutting edge of this changing world.
Yeah, and we're not taking millions and billions of either taxpayer money or corporate money or other stuff.
We do this
like
for
that.
the love of it. Yeah, and we definitely are not making any money.
Most of the independent media is that way. We're like, yeah, they'll have some sponsorships and other stuff, but
we have some ads on our podcast side. So there's a listener side to this podcast if you're watching this on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook or wherever, because we live stream at multiple places. But we also play on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google and everything. And so over there, of course, you're not going to be able to always see us, but you're going to be able to still take part in the conversation. And there's a reason I brought this up. What was the point of that?
Of us being the media now, and also for the fact that we communicate, like we used to get news from each other directly before the news conglomerates. And my point with this is the news has gotten so big, it's become this institution that's hard to say, no, you guys are full of crap. Whereas like, hey, your drunk buddy, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, that's some flat earth stuff. You're kind of full of crap. So you can take it with a grain of salt easier than these official sources, because we've been programmed for the idea of an official source opposed to doing our own due diligence and doing the follow through. And not everybody has time for the follow through, right?
Right.
But then that's where it's
Some can't of us get mad. Have a passion.
You can't get you can't get mad at people who are gonna follow through with stuff and go, actually, I found something. Like, but the media,
we need more of us certainly paying as much attention as we can to
with the media. Like, how do you say, they're full of crap because they've got all the money and everything, and they can smear you 6 ways from Sunday and call you stupid and all this stuff, and just
the tables have turned.
Yes, well, that's
how the tables have turned, because now we are coming up and podcast independent media is taking over, and I think this is going to be very good for our world. It's going to create a very healthy, hopefully, eventually a healthy ecosystem, place where we can all talk and work out how to function together as a global species, now all interconnected and getting to know one another. So this is quite telling. So for those of you out there who are unaware, there was a gentleman named Edward Bernays in the early 1900s that actually developed what we now know as modern public relations. He perfected the art of propaganda and marketing. And let's just go ahead and check out a little clip from this documentary, A Century of Self, to see how much he impacted history, how he impacted the world to this day, and how we are controlled, how we are manipulated. Let's go.
Bernays had manipulated the American people, but he had done so because he, like many others at the time, believed that the interests of business and the interests of America were indivisible, especially when faced with the threat of communism. But Bernays was convinced that to explain this rationally to the American people was impossible, because they were not rational. Instead, one had to touch on their inner fears and manipulate them in the interests of a higher truth. He called it the engineering of consent.
He was doing it for the American way of life, and to which he was devoted, sincerely devoted. And yet he felt the people were really pretty stupid. And that's the paradox. If
There's a
you
paradox.
don't leave it up to the people themselves, but force them to choose what you want them to choose, however subtly, then it's not democracy anymore.
So there are arguments to be made to the effect that mass manipulation, truth management, manufacturing of consent, whatever term you want to give it, is important because the people are kind of dumb, or they're not as wise as the wisest that have the most power in a nation. And so this is a really strange paradox that men like Edward Bernays sincerely believed, while still loving America in their own strange way. It's funny how we can justify
Well, I guess
our sins.
It gets down to that, the self-eliting thing. So, like, basically this idea that, well, I know better how to do it, and other people are dumb. It's quite Malthusian if you really look at it. And even if your goal or your aim is good, the idea that it's like, well, I'm not as dumb as everybody else. And in a group, yes, you are. Like, a person can be smart. People grouped together tend to be, stupid.
They can be smart, but all of them have to be very well educated, critical thinkers, virtuous, and then even still mob mentality can take over, which is what I think you're referring to.
I think he's looking at, like, somebody in this mindset. If you get yourself in this mindset, it's like, well, okay, there's a group of people, and people do behave irrationally in massive groups. They'll go in any direction that just a few of them on the periphery are forced into out of just, like, you have to, because if everybody's moving with it in the group, you have to. Like group panicking and
exactly, yeah.
And that's why we label our exits really well, like, exit and all this stuff, and fire extinguishers are bright because, like, when we're panicking all together,
we're running off of our
that may be
point.
true, but once you get to the point where you can start manipulating groups of people, you no longer are seeing the individuals. You're just seeing an end to, or a means to your ends.
Right.
And you have this whole, well, I'm noble because, I'm helping people. And yes, the American way of life and the American dream is something that's noble. We can say as much as we want about where we've fallen.
These lessers need to be led by us betters, is this mentality.
Well,
and so this actually runs counter to our forefathers' intentions, which we're going to get into here shortly. There's a powerful rebuttal. So first, we're going to steel man the art of mass manipulation that governments and corporations and so forth utilize to control mass amounts of people, how they manage the truth, how they manufacture our consent. We're going to steel man that, which means we're going to defend this in a powerful way from their point of view. And then we're going to offer a counter perspective from our very own forefathers and how they intended our system to be self-governed. So we absolutely require a highly educated, critical thinking, virtuous citizenry to be able to uphold these standards and values that allows for a healthy, functioning democratic republic. So that's the game. That's what we're going to get into. Let's go ahead and we'll finish the last few seconds of this clip out, and then we're going to jump right to the next, guys. Let's go.
It's something else. It's being told what to do. It's that old authoritarian thing.
Yeah, and there we go. All right. So
the conscious
and disregard that. Next clip. And here is how Edward Bernays hooked woman on cigarettes.
Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it.
He said, we're losing half of our market.
because men have invoked a taboo against women smoking in public.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do anything about that? I said, let me think about it. And then I said, have I your permission to see a psychoanalyst to find out what cigarettes mean to women? He said, what'll it cost? So I called up Dr. Brill, A.A. Brill, who was a leading psychoanalyst in New York at that time.
How come you didn't call your uncle? Why didn't you call your uncle?
Because he was in Vienna.
He was in Vienna.
Couldn't have bothered
A.A.
him.
Brill was
No,
one of the
it's
first
not in the US.
psychoanalysts in America. And for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power.
Yeah, of course.
And of
He
male.
told Bernays that if he could
Male sexual
and of
power?
male sexual
Yes.
power.
Yeah.
Yes.
He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power,
Yeah.
then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is crazy.
And the thing is people believed it.
No, just
And
wait.
they fell
Just
for
wait
it.
to see how he pulled it off, though. This is
Whoa.
insane, 'cause it actually worked. Now watch this,
Yeah.
guys. Oh my
Every
God.
year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came. And Bernays decided to stage an event there.
Okay.
He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays
So they're holding them in their garters, and so there's like a sexualized aspect of it right there. Now check this out.
And also it's sneaky and like and
yeah,
we're gonna
exactly.
stick it to him.
Watch
then
this.
informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
Yeah.
So Bernays told people in the press that he knew about this group of suffragettes that were going to be protesting the next morning at the Easter Day parade, and that they were going to be raising their torches of freedom, a term he comes up with. Now watch this.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase, which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom.
Yeah, because it's freedom. It's talking about freedom and liberty. Oh my God, Lady Liberty, the torch.
Well, and also
Statue of Liberty.
So nowadays it's this, it's the pussy hat, the pink hat with the ears things, and it's the I'm with her, and it's the same techniques.
The same people that design these kinds of campaigns are the same people that design toothpaste commercials. They're companies we don't even know about that are multi-billion-dollar major companies.
Well, and it's definitely techniques that can be learned and implemented. And this is like, if you ever wonder what elites are being taught, it's stuff like this. There are techniques that work really good to get masses of people or individuals, depending on the circumstance, to not necessarily do what you want them to do, but give them an affordance to do what you want them to do. Humans are naturally going to do it. If we see an opportunity to do it and it makes us feel good and we have the right incentive, bam, we'll do it every time. All you have to do is just create the opportunity.
And they can raise the fidelity of it up to be bright enough and sensational enough to really grab your attention. Okay, so here we go. Watch this, guys.
I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch, you see? And so all of this is there together. There's emotion, there's memory, there's a rational phrase. Even though it's using a lot of emotional elements, it's a phrase that works in a rational sense. All of this is together. And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York papers, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic act.
What Bernays had created was the idea that if a woman smoked, it made her more powerful and independent. An idea that still persists today.
Embrace me, my sweet
It made him realize that it was possible to persuade people to behave irrationally if you link products to their emotional desires and feelings. The idea that smoking actually made women freer was completely irrational, but it made them feel more independent. It meant that irrelevant objects could become powerful emotional symbols of how you wanted to be seen by others.
Eddie Bernays saw the way to sell product was not to sell it to your intellect, that you ought to buy an automobile, but that you will feel better about it if you have this automobile.
Better about it.
I think he originated that idea, that they weren't just purchasing something, but they were engaging themselves.
So instead of purchasing out of need, purchasing out
emotionally
of
or personally,
emotional want.
In the product or service. That it's not, you think you need a new piece of clothes.
Okay, so that's good. That's good on that one.
Yeah, well, you know, the promise of that time that was being made is we're going to have this brand new, enlightened, awesome, futuristic future, right? Like if you look at the old sci-fi stuff, you know, like people back in this time were very imaginative as how great the world can be. And then at this time it's like, well, women, you gotta keep up with it, because in the future, you know, you're gonna have all the best things, but then also you can be your own person and all this, and you know, all the other stuff. And so it's like, well, smoke the cigarette, experience the new lifestyle, have the new power, be empowered. Women's empowerment brought to you by cigarette.
They're selling us. And then the same cigarette companies took over all the big food companies and now make the food more addictive. Or
even by car or appliance or...
yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
You know, whatever the product is.
People will think you're more sexy if you buy this.
So what is the need that we have that this want is fulfilling that's deeper than just
belonging.
a want?
A lot of it's belonging. Yeah. It's appealing to our social, needs. Yeah.
Because like...
Speaking of, this goes on now, so we can actually jump over if you're ready. Let's roll.
And so that there's this real openness to Bernays' techniques being used to sell products to the masses.
Beginning in the early 20s, the New York banks funded the creation of chains of department stores across America. They were to be the outlets for the mass-produced goods, and Bernays' job was to produce the new type of customer. Bernays began to create many of the techniques of mass consumer persuasion that we now live with. He was employed by William Randolph Hearst to promote his new women's magazines, and Bernays glamorized them by placing articles and advertisements that linked products made by others of his clients to famous film stars like Clara Bow, who was also his client. Bernays also began the practice of product placement in the movies, and he dressed the stars at the film's premieres with clothes and jewelry from other firms he represented. He employed psychologists to issue reports that said products were good for you, and then pretended they were independent studies.
Oh, this is good. Listen to
He
this.
organized fashion shows in the department stores.
Over there a little bit.
Psychologists to issue reports that said products were good for you, and then pretended they were independent studies.
He hired psychologists to do these reports and then pretended they were independent.
He organized fashion shows in the department stores and paid celebrities to repeat the new and essential message. You bought things not just for need, but to express your inner sense of yourself to others.
Yeah. Oh, the appeal to ego.
Well,
so here we are. This is why this documentary is called A Century of Self.
And identity.
Identity,
like this
ego.
Internal. So like it's happening now. Everything's about how do you identify? I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, I'm Christian, I'm atheist, I'm Giger, everything else.
We think we are the things we like. Yeah. And we develop an ego, a self-image, a psychological sense of self. That is the ego. We all have one. And the great problem with this world is that we all think we are our egos, these cast images, these projections that we put forth. That's literally just a jumble of thoughts and ideas and conditioning. And you can actually see your own conditioning. You know, we talk about this a lot on this podcast, how to realize our most authentic self. It's being able to see how our thoughts and emotions arise and then choose one's response to life as it flows, rather than easily being swayed around to the point where you blame the outside world and others for everything that goes wrong. We start to see how are we personally responsible and how can we personally change this world from the inside out. So that's the name of the game.
So basically there's something in us that wants to get out. And the only way the way this works on us is, it almost is like, in order to get that out, we must consume something, a new garment or an experience or something. But the act of consumption, getting this thing in us out. I don't know. It's weird because consuming is in expressing outwardly. I don't want to say vomiting, but vomiting out, vomiting your personality out. It's a weird paradox that's here. It's like, we want to express ourselves,
we can actually be our
but
true
we've gotta
selves
consume.
from a loving place rather than a fearful place. And I think that's part of the problem. As Bill Hicks said, are you seeing the world through the eyes of fear or eyes of love? And that very much is going to influence how you orient yourself in the world and how the world responds to you as a result. And then how you feel about the world. You realize you actually get to master your own emotions, and the mind is a servant. You don't have to be led around by one's thoughts and easily battered around by the storms of emotions that arise in our bodies. We can learn to be still through the storm and a sturdy rock for others around us. And that's the best thing that we can do to create the world that we wish to see, instead of blaming the outside and only thinking that getting the right politician or person in the right position of power is going to change everything for us. It's going to help maybe if it's the right person, but we still have to hold these representatives accountable. So let's do that together, guys. Let's jump on back here now. Yeah.
There's a psychology of dress. Have you ever thought about it? How it can express your character? You all have interesting characters, but some of them are all hidden. I wonder why you all want to dress always the same, with the same hats and the same coats.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of you are interesting and have wonderful things about you. But
This is
looking
100
at you in
years
the
ago.
street,
That was 1920s Aviator. Yeah.
you all look so much the same.
Wow.
And that's why I'm talking to you about the psychology of dress.
Like
Try and
gaslighting.
express yourselves better
Gaslight
in your
marketing.
dress.
Wow.
Well,
In
you all look the
1927,
same.
an
Why not
American
be
journalist
different?
wrote,
Why not be different?
"A change has come over
excessively different even. Like, why not? Just keep turning it up until the point of insanity.
Yeah.
Let's see how far we can get away with this. So, yeah, that's probably enough of that one, too. I think, there's a few seconds left. Let's hear why I had it down to...
our democracy. It is called consumptionism.
Oh, yes.
The American citizen's first importance to his country is now no longer that of citizen, but that of consumer.
Yes, there it is. Yes. So that is the switch. Check that documentary out, guys. It's a 4-part documentary released by the BBC back in the day when they still did pretty good reporting. And this like non-biased, actually objective journalism. And it's a 4-hour documentary. It's incredible. It's going to teach you everything you need to know about truth management and manipulation, mass manipulation, and manufacturing of consent, all that stuff. It's really an incredible documentary. Highly recommended. Link is in the description to this video, as well as the rest of everything we're covering tonight. So make sure you guys check out those links. And if you're enjoying what's happening here, please do like and subscribe. It helps us grow and reach more people. And do so for everything and everyone that we're sharing with you today if you find it valuable. Rock and roll, let's go. Okay, so Noam Chomsky, a lot of people know that name. He's done some good work in the world. And, I might disagree with some of his politics, particularly like some of his recent support of, strangely, the Biden administration, like from this guy that is an avowed anarchist and famous for calling out the left and the right previously. And he wrote a great book, Manufacturing of Consent, which I believe I have up here somewheres. But yeah, let's check out what Chomsky has to say here. This is back in the day on C-SPAN 2, Book TV. I'm guessing this is like 90s. Check it out. Talking on Edward Bernays.
To his best ability with twisting people's view of what was good for them so that he could sell products to them.
Thanks, caller. Eddie Bernays.
Actually, you're right, he lived in Cambridge. We weren't that far apart. I never actually met him. But,
Called the father of public relations.
Yeah, but I've written a fair amount. I've looked at a lot of his work, and in fact, I've written a fair amount about it. I suspect that it wasn't his Freud who was the big influence on him, but rather, in fact, exactly what he said. He said,
actually, we didn't even cover this. I forgot to say. So Edward Bernays is famously known as the nephew of Freud, of course, the famous psychoanalyst. And he did get some ideas from Freud, certainly, but Chomsky is saying, actually, I think he got most of his influence from
the major influence on him was his participation in the first state propaganda agency in the United States, Woodrow Wilson's Committee on Public Information, which was established in order to try to drive a basically pacifist population into support for the war that Wilson very much wanted to get into in Europe. And it succeeded. Within a short period of time, the propaganda efforts, they were called propaganda in those days, it was more honest use of terminology, the propaganda efforts of the Committee on Public Information, a very Orwellian name, did succeed in driving a pacifist population into raving anti-German fanatics, you know, to the point where the Boston Symphony Orchestra couldn't play Beethoven, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, you actually have some propaganda that you had looked up.
Oh,
do you have any of that ready to bring up on the screen?
Yeah, I've got a few, just some. I got one that actually, I got two. I got a war bond, and then I've got one that's kind of offensive here. So let me get this just queued up real quick. And
history of U.S. propaganda used as a tool of manufacture consent.
So yeah, this is
wow.
Liberty USA bonds. It's a type of. This is the This is the third Liberty Loan Campaign, Boy Scouts of America. And there's a little Boy Scout that's holding his sword up, you know, to, be prepared. And this is selling war bonds because, well, we need money. So we needed IOUs. And then there's, don't speak the enemy of the language. The four freedoms are not in their vocabulary. Speak American. And if you look at it, it's very caricature-esque. And this is just a small amount of what you can find, but, you know, old war propaganda is actually quite interesting for what it is. But so I wish I had more, but I don't think we quite need much more. But the idea is, because it wasn't also just pictures and stuff like that. I mean, like the whole Bugs Bunny and everything, and
oh sure,
Donald, well, all of Disney and Warner Brothers and everything. I think there was even I think it was Disney or it was Warner Brothers or the artist from either or directly worked with the U.S. Military in their
this
like
was
training films for the soldiers that were like top secret training films and stuff.
I've seen that
because they needed something that would catch the soldier's eye and do all this stuff too. But yeah, well, the programming and propaganda we have today, it's exactly the same thing. Why does anybody really, like in America, really care about what's happening in Ukraine? Yeah, we don't like Russia and we got problems with Russia, but really, why? Why do you actually care? Other than people dying, but
has it been framed a certain way?
We didn't care in Libya. We didn't care in Syria. We didn't, care in all these other places that are happening.
So that's the question. Has it been framed in such a way as to raise an emotional response in us, such that we would be willing to accept this war and the hundreds of billions of dollars were given to the Ukraine?
Yeah, well,
government, one of the most corrupt governments on the planet.
Yeah, and I don't mean to single them out or anything. America.
No, not the people.
We didn't really care about the Rwandan genocide, and actually, Noam Chomsky didn't have the best take on that either.
Right.
That's a whole nother thing. If you want to get into propaganda and people the radio and media taking over, making people psychotic, go look into that. But kind of have to have a strong stomach for it. But the propaganda. It's one of the mediums of control that that are used on us. And when you mix propaganda with something that you can buy or an experience you can do, now you can make money off of it.
Now you're charging
it's not just your opinion anymore. It's now you can put dollars towards it like that.
What also makes us passive observers instead of participants in a healthy functioning of a democratic republic. So that is also
just buy the thing or give the money and you don't have to do nothing. You just
if you're a bunch of oligarchs and you want to take over a democratic republic like the United States from the inside out. That's how you do it. Corporatists out there. Of course, I'm not telling them anything they don't already know. They're doing it.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little bit more of this clip from Chomsky here. Check this out, guys.
It drove the country into a kind of hysteria. And the participants in that committee included many people of subsequent great distinction and influence. Edward Bernays was one. Another was Walter Lippmann, the leading public intellectual of the 20th century and most important figure in American media. Both of them went through that experience and learned from it, and wrote about what they learned from it. What they learned, as Bernays put it in a famous book of his called Propaganda, late 1920s, I think, he said that we have learned that the intelligent minorities can engineer consent through the use of manipulation, propaganda, and control. And we should do it for the benefit of the public. It's for the benefit of the public that we should control them and engineer their consent. Lippmann said pretty much the same thing. Also drawing from the experience of the wartime propaganda agency. He wrote important essays on democracy in the 1920s called Progressive Essays on Democracy. They were both liberals, kind of Wilsonian progressives. He said, well, we've learned that there's a new art in the practice of democracy. The art of what he called manufacturing consent. Bernays' term was engineering of consent. And this is very significant because the public should not be participants in the democratic process. They should be spectators, not participants. They are ignorant and meddlesome outsiders, as he put it. And for their own benefit, we, the intelligent minority, the responsible men, must control them. Bernays' particular significance.
Yeah, okay. So that's enough of that.
Yeah, and
well said, though. Very well put there. He definitely drills down into it.
Is there not a party right now that is has put their foot in a whole bunch of doo-doo that have the idea of like, well, you know, we're that college-educated, you know, minority of people that know better, so you need to listen to us, you know, and they're constantly browbeating us with this, you're not educated, you're not educated. It's like, well, we may not have your certificates, we may not have, like, you know, your whatever your, you know, BS, Bachelor's of Science, or, you know, your doctorate of this, that, or the other. Apparently, a girl got a doctorate in how smells in written works, like descriptions of smells in written works, are racist. Like, we have PhDs for this, and this is so, and that's a logical fallacy, is this idea that you, just because you have a title or you've been through the process or you're part of the authority now means you're right.
Right.
Or means somebody else is right if they're part of that authority. I don't know. It's pissing me off, you know, the hoity-toity, I'm educated, therefore I'm better than you crap. Like, dude, what's your education? And are you sure? I don't think many people are much better or worse than any other people. We're pretty neutral.
Homogeneous, right?
Yeah, when it comes to that. It's only, you know,
actual native intelligence.
Well, and no, but just, you know, like, unless we're talking about expertise about, like, you know, how does the Large Hadron Collider work, and you're an engineer that makes it work, you would know more. But when it comes to the ability to gather information for yourself and make a decision for yourself and get through life and see when something's wrong, and we're all pretty average on that as humans. In mass, we are. But you know, there's some people that are really smart that can see trends, you know, way ahead of when other people can see them. But for the most part, when we're making our day-to-day decisions and we're seeing, you know, groceries are expensive and whatever's going on right now ain't working, we're all pretty average on that. You know, you can't get a degree in common sense.
True that.
You know,
really?
Like,
so I looked up a steel manning of truth management and the manufacturing of consent, and asked ChatGPT to give a very concise steel manning of why truth management and manufacturing of consent are seen as necessary in modern society. So here's its brief definitions. Truth management. This refers to the strategic control or shaping of information to influence public perception, often by governments, institutions, or media outlets. It is not necessarily about outright deception, but about presenting or emphasizing certain truths while omitting others, framing issues in specific ways to maintain social stability or further certain agendas. That is truth management. Now, the manufacturing of consent, they're both similar to one another. This is a term coined by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky. Each independently have used this term. It refers to the process by which governments, media, and corporations manipulate public opinion to align with their interests. It is a broader phenomenon where the consensus or approval of is engineered, often through media and other forms of communication to support policies or decisions that might not necessarily reflect the true will of the people.
Oh, sure. It's like if you take a poll, you can take a bad poll and only, take like 1,500 people from like the most rural part of Minnesota and call it a national poll and put it out there and get a big media person to pick you up and put it out there and like, oh, wow, like this poll, it came from CNN or MSNBC. I trust it, but it's 1,000 rural Minnesotans talking about and supposedly representing the entire country. Like, well, that's a bad poll. That's a manufacturing of this consent, like manufacturing of public endorsement, if you will. And that's why it's like we don't take polls too seriously, because it's really hard to make accurate representative polls for large masses of people.
Yeah, especially with such small sample sizes typically.
Yeah.
So more on the steel meaning of why these methods of social control are needed. Social stability. In complex modern societies, governments and institutions often face the challenge of ensuring stability and cohesion amongst diverse populations with different interests. So you can avoid unrest and chaos and so on and so forth. Efficient decision-making. In any large society, there are difficult and often controversial decisions that must be made, whether in economic policy, national defense, or public welfare. True. By managing truth and shaping consent, governments can more effectively mobilize public support for these decisions.
Yeah.
Now, this is easy to do, and
if you remove the options, it's quicker, right?
It's also important to do if your citizenry has become not as well educated as it should be to be able to effectively manage a system of self-governance like this.
Yeah, but I don't think.
So this is what they fall to when they failed at, when we, I guess, collectively have failed at keeping up our education and our sense of virtue and our capacity for critical thinking. We start to lose control, and the government and power centers start to turn to these methodologies to maintain control. They're saying they're doing this to prevent harmful narratives, ministry of truth, things like this.
Yeah, we literally in America for like, what, how many weeks was it? Well, it wasn't even that long, but had a ministry of truth.
We did, yeah. It's like straight out of Orwell.
And it's
nuts, yeah. Balancing ethical governance while truth management and consent manufacturing have the potential for abuse. A steelman perspective would recognize they can be tools used in ethical governance. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So this is what people like Edward Bernays would think. Now, so I thanked ChatGPT because God knows you should be polite and kind to these things just in case they really do become self-aware and then they look back in their memory banks and we're all assholes to them.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
be kind to the AI. So truth management and the manufacturing of consent, while often viewed skeptically, can be seen as essential tools for governance in complex modern societies. So I told it, well said, you win the Edward Bernays Award for Professional Mass Manipulation. It said thank you for the recognition, and then it actually admits, it says, though I must admit, I don't quite aspire to win that particular award. Exclamation mark. But I'm glad the explanation resonated with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was being clever and kidding with you, so I'm glad to hear that you agree, because that was totally meant sarcastically. Good catch. Because at the end it says, if you'd like to dive deeper into blah, blah, blah.
No, I think that's encoded in the programming of ChatGPT.
It's clever.
The humble,
clever,
the HumbleBot code.
Of course, yeah.
So we don't get freaked out by it, It
says, oh, I see now. You definitely got me there with the clever sarcasm. I appreciate the playful spirit, and I'm glad I didn't fall into the trap. If you've got any more, blah, 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 blah. So anyways, now I ask it, okay, continuing on this topic, let us now consider how the founding fathers of the United States considered it essential for the health and survival of the public for the citizens to be highly educated, critical thinkers with a deep sense of moral virtue. In this light, can't the techniques of mass manipulation, omitting of facts, purposeful omitting of facts, to spin a false narrative that essentially gives a misimpression of reality be seen as lying? If not lying, at least dishonest? And would they not be needed in a more thoughtful, virtuous society? Wouldn't they not be needed in a more thoughtful, virtuous society? What are your thoughts on this as a potential solution? Please reply in a similarly sized paragraph. So I'm not trying to read forever. And it did all right there. So it says, actually it did great. It said, the founding fathers, particularly figures like Jefferson and Madison, believed that the health of the republic relied on an educated, virtuous citizenry. Virtue being a key word there.
Well, and educated too.
Mm-hmm. And educated, but virtuous. Remember how Vervaeke pointed out the grave importance of virtue.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a virtuous citizenry capable of critical thinking and making informed decisions for the common good. From this perspective, techniques like mass manipulation and the omission of facts to shape a desired narrative would indeed be seen as a form of dishonesty, as they distort the truth and hinder the public's ability to engage in rational discourse. That's really important there. It also hinders, it weakens, it handicaps us. Our ability to engage in a rational discourse is so important to the healthy functioning of this republic.
And I think that's what the forefathers would mean by education, is not you go to an institution or you got a certification, but it's the necessary prerequisites in order to teach yourself more things.
And engage in rational discourse to figure these things out together rationally without letting your emotions take over and getting all tribal.
Whereas now education just seems so much as just programming and how to be a good little citizen, whatever the whims of whoever the hell you want to say is controlling this thing says. Whereas, if you have educated people that, like say learn the trivium and the quadrivium, which is just the guide for how to learn anything you want to learn, pretty much.
Classical education.
We're going to put them through 12 plus years of school and then another 4 to 10 years of school, depending on what you're doing. And then by the end of it, you'll be like a hyper freaking specialist that's only good at one freaking thing.
Yeah.
Which, if you're doctors and surgeons and other stuff like that, is really important.
They're now recommending people diversify their skill set because we're going into a rapidly changing future where you're going to need multiple skills and you're going to have to stay on top of your coding or whatever it is that you enjoy doing, learning all the new languages to keep up with this changing world, because AI is going to change the game completely. Everything's about to turn up to the nth degree. I don't think any of us have any conception of how crazy and how radically changed the world is going to be in the next just even few to 5 years.
Oh, just next year, dude.
Yeah. So continuing on, in a society that values virtue and individual responsibility, citizens should be equipped with the tools to discern truth from manipulation, not to be led astray by it. While such techniques might be justified in times of crisis or where stability is threatened, their use in a more thoughtful, virtuous society where the public is encouraged to critically engage with information would be deeply problematic. Ultimately, any system that relies on manipulation undermines the very essence of a democratic, virtuous society where transparency and truth should guide the decisions of both citizens and leaders. So then I had it expand its argument a little bit, and it really just does a great job. So please expand this argument against truth management and manufacturing of consent. It goes on. It's how these techniques represent a betrayal of the very principles that sustain a democratic society. They are, by their very nature, undermining the capacity of individuals to think critically and make decisions based on accurate understanding of reality. Vervaeke would love this. The intentional manipulation of information, whether through omission or distortion, prevents citizens from engaging in meaningful discourse and making informed choices, eroding their autonomy. In a society that prioritizes moral virtue and intellectual integrity, such practices sow distrust, create dependency on manipulated narratives, and diminish the public's ability to hold their leaders accountable. Rather than fostering an enlightened, virtuous citizenry, truth management encourages passivity, where people are steered by hidden agendas instead of empowering them with the full range of facts necessary for wise decision-making. A true republic, as envisioned by the founders, demands transparency and honesty, where citizens are free to challenge power and contribute to the common good without being misled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing Yuri Bezmenov mentioned in one of his interviews about, like, one of the things that the KGB really liked about the hippie movement in the United States is because it was all about, just drop out and meditate and don't worry about the world and, get away from it. Just, anti-war, but
that people could
not
take it that
else.
direction, and that direction could be
encouraged. And basically
clever.
It was just, okay, well, go off and do your little music festival thing, and then occasionally you have a protest of, loving in the streets and whatever. But then you could, as a KGB agent or apparatus, or really any control mechanism or apparatus that wants to subvert a large group of people, you go in there and you start putting stuff in there. Now you get the radical hippies, you know, the Weather Underground, you know, and then the Black Panthers, and then you get,
and then you got the rest of the other 90-something% just getting stuck on partying instead of self-realization.
They're dropping out and taking too much acid, you know, and joining a cult in the middle of somewhere. You know? It's crazy.
Yeah.
But, you know, because it's not just our government, like, you know, our authoritarian government that's doing it to us, you know, it's also other governments.
Oh, man.
And it's a whole type of warfare now, very sophisticated warfare. And not even just governments anymore. We have corporate entities that are everywhere, as influential and rich and well-armed as any other government, really.
Becoming that way, and more so than most governments on the planet, but there's just a few left, like ourselves, that still have the weight, the power, the influence to be able to push back to some degree. But boy, have we been infiltrated and taken over from the inside out. We are truly deeply manipulated by an oligarchical, corporatist elite that does not care for our system of self-governance, does not care for this democratic republic, would happily violate this Constitution and put in some kind of weird, strange, global, corporate, neo-Chinese Marxist system in place that would just put us all in a literal prison planet.
Well, that's the
corporatists would love to take over.
That's the WHO, the UN, the WEF.
Yep.
Like, if you actually read their stuff and their publications, that's what they want. They want a global, a totalistic global governance.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is totalitarianism. You know, it's like,
corporate totalitarianism, which could conceivably be worse than any actual national government's totalitarianism in history, because it's not even founded on any ideals, but make money by any means, fair or foul.
In all honesty, to be way more successful than actual fascism. I'm talking about Italian fascism, not, you know, what everybody says is fascism now, or even National Socialism, because those were still very nationalistic. So even though they were totalitarian within their own sphere, it was just their own sphere. And the only way for them to take over the world is to turn the entire world into them. Whereas now we've, you know, embraced diversity as unity, right? You know, when that woman was talking about the clothes,
diversity of appearance and identity, not even a diversity of thought.
But so that little that woman telling other women to buy stuff because you all look the same, right? And what she was saying is, oh yeah, well, you all look the same, but you need to look different because we need to be different. Even though each person in there, even though they look the same, was very different from each other, and very the same as well, but very different, thought differently. And when it comes down to diversity of thought, it all depends on what you're trying to do. Because if I'm trying to fix a car, I don't want a bunch of dog groomers in there telling me how to fix the car. You know what I mean? But appropriate, like, you should be open to counterpoints
in
and
a healthy
ideas.
society. You need to have diversity of thought.
Well, it should be encouraged, but not as a total thing. You know?
Oh, sure, of course. We don't need to go that detail.
But the paradox of, you know, like this global control mechanism wants to embrace our diversity and everything, but by doing that turns us into this just homogenous mush.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, and
that's the slippery slope.
Yeah,
that it leads us down. Actually, that was part of my conversation. So let's jump back here to that screen. So I continue my conversation. I said, indeed, ChatGPT, I can see how such techniques may be argued for in terms of use in short durations during specific emergency situations, but even then, it may be a slippery slope that turns into an appreciation and preference for these methodologies, once again eroding the fabric of a healthy democratic republicanism. And ChatGPT replies, exactly. While one could argue that in rare high-stakes situations, such as national crises, wars, or pandemics, some degree of truth management or narrative shaping, frame management, may be necessary to maintain order or prevent panic. The danger lies in how easily such practices can become normalized. Once governments or institutions begin to manipulate the public perception at all for perceived short-term stability, it becomes a slippery slope. Over time, these methods risk eroding the very principles of transparency and accountability and public participation that sustain a democratic republic. The more citizens are conditioned to accept curated truths or controlled narratives, the less likely they are to engage in critical thinking or challenge those in power. What starts as a temporary measure for the greater good can shift into a preference for manipulation, subtly altering the relationship between the governed and their leaders.
Well, you know, temporary measures always turn into permanent fixtures. That's just how it is. And man, and now just imagine this, like, and not to sound like, you know, one of them bad guys, but I don't like the UN, I don't like the WHO, and I don't like the WEF. I understood what purpose they served. Like, you know, like you want nations to be able to talk together so we don't just all out warfare and start killing each other again. But when it comes to, you know, atrocities are allowed to happen because, well, we can't say nothing about it, but then also we want everybody to, like, stop farming except for these other places. So we're going to dictate who gets to do what and centralized plan that. Yeah, that's when it becomes tyrannical, right?
Yeah.
And the WEF, well, yeah, we do have to have the top head economic leaders in the world talking to each other instead of fighting each other. But when it comes to, well, we're going to decide who gets to do what and who's going to sell to who and all, you know.
Oh man, those
stuff.
meetings need to be like on C-SPAN to where we can see what's happening.
No, like they are. Like you can look up like every meeting except for like a lot of the backdoor stuff.
Well, there's backdoor stuff that the Trilateral Commission and WEF and CFR all
they are private entities, so they can do whatever they want. But they're out in the open, so
but they're managing the entire globe.
Oh yeah. Well, and even the WHO, man, there's some scary stuff that they're trying to put through, which is like a treaty between like 193 or 197 countries, which is basically pretty much the whole world. Where if the WHO says, oh, you got to lock down because some contagion got out, you got to lock down. No country sovereignty, no nothing.
Can supersede.
So all you got to do is just take one of these nasty viruses that you've been making in Wuhan and other places and put it and go, oops, now total control. It just like that. And I'm not saying they're going to do it or it's going to happen that way.
But that opens the door for that possibility.
Let's not give them that affordance, right?
No, you cannot make that affordance available because someone will take advantage of it. So that's a really good point. So at the very end of this, ChatGPT states, eventually this leads to a society where decision-making becomes more about controlling consent than fostering informed, active citizenship, a dangerous outcome for any true republic that values individual agency and the health of its democratic institutions. Absolutely, the very kind of crisis we find ourselves in with these powerful global groups vying for control, with whole nations for control of this planet and its people. So, man, we got a few more shorts, documentaries.
Hey there, Ninja Bat. Yep.
What's up, Ninja Bat in the house? Oh, all good, man. What was for dinner?
Something good.
One nation under control with division and injustice for all. Yep. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but you gotta, you gotta convince them that you gotta convince the people that's what they want, right? You gotta manufacture that consensus. We were all down with this to begin with. Yeah. Well, it's like now after the Trump election, how many people are coming out now that are like, yeah, well, I was always, kind of like on the side of, what's up with the media or whatever. Like all these, it's just like, guys, just admit you guys were wrong and you're part of the bandwagon and now you're off the wagon, opposed to just, no, we're fine. Because, we don't trust you. We're probably like, if you've worked in mainstream media for a long time and you didn't come out and like really like blow the lid off some stuff, even if you do, we're still not going to trust you.
Yeah, no.
And by we, I mean like those of us who took the jump into independent media and decided to listen to too many podcasts and read too many fine print papers and do all that stuff.
Started sourcing and doing our own research, verifying and checking the legitimacy of sources and looking at multiple sides of issues rather than just one side, rather than just what's delivered to you and from the tube of your preferred reality tunnel tribal perspective. So
yeah,
I don't know if that sentence even made sense, man.
No, well, the boob tube, it's for boobs, and you used to be able to see boobs on it. Well, I guess you can now. It's just, you buy the HBO
I know
Max.
There's new words we're not allowed to say now.
Oh, boob? You can't say
YouTube.
boob?
No, it's different words for YouTube now that are no longer available. That's,
What? Wait, you can't make fun of YouTube?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that YouTube has added new words to their list of things that you do not want to say, or else you're going to lose the advertising on your channel.
No,
we don't have advertising on our channel here yet.
Best
anyway.
practices.
But if you guys want to help us grow, make sure you smash the like and subscribe. So now we're going to learn about how mass psychosis can control entire populations. That's the title of this short documentary created by Mr. Brain on YouTube. Check him out. Let's check out this first little clip we got here, guys. Learn more about this.
This quote from the renowned psychologist Gustave Le Bon: "The mass never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error, if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim." This sobering observation sets the stage for our exploration of how entire societies can descend into madness.
Yep. So now we're going to kind of zero in on, let's let it be unnamed, but you know what we're going to be talking about here. We all just went through it for the past few years. So let's zoom ahead to our next little bit. Yeah.
According to the famous psychologist Carl Jung, the greatest danger lies within our own minds. Jung argued that our inability to deal with the forces of our own psyche poses the most significant threat to our civilization. It's as if we're our own worst enemies, or as the Latin proverb puts it, man is wolf to man. Jung considered this a sad, yet eternal truism. But when does this wolf-like nature come to the forefront? Jung observed that it's most prominent during those dark periods of history, when mental illness becomes the norm rather than the exception in a society. He termed this disturbing phenomenon a psychic epidemic. In his work, The Symbolic Life, Jung writes, "Indeed, it is becoming ever more obvious that it is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man, for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes." It's a chilling thought.
Yeah, and this is why we spent a year covering John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lecture series, because that's exactly what Vervaeke takes apart, how to build resistance to these psychic epidemics of mass manipulation and mass psychosis. So moving on, you got anything to say on that? You can just jump ahead.
We would call it hysteria. Mass hysteria back in the day. The Beatles had their most famously had their mass hysteria where you see, bunches of women just freaking out because the Beatles are playing. But then, you had war hysteria, like after 9/11, everybody was gung ho. Let's go over there and blast them out of their caves. Let's take them all down, and everybody.
85+% of the American public supported the war in Iraq and George Bush directly following 9/11.
Oh, and in this one, he brought up too, like when mental illness becomes the norm. Well, I'd venture to say there probably are more people that would report having some sort of mental illness than not anymore, for at least my generation. And afterwards,
it's actually kind of popular in some circles.
Well, dude, like how much
identify with.
Well, how much
I just got diagnosed as this or that, and then you get put it up on social media. You get
what are the pharmaceuticals that everybody are taking? There's maintenance one for like health conditions that we all have, but a lot of the pharmaceuticals that particularly younger people are taking are mood stabilizers or this, that, or the other. That they're the happy pills. And our current society in the West, well, actually, China has its own issues, but I can speak on the West, has become sick. And it's not just because something has happened with our brains and our brains changed and everybody's sick. It's our motivations. It's our relationships with other people. It's like, how many intact families are there anymore, really? Like, that's becoming less and less common. Like, how often do you talk to the people around you and your neighbors? There's a lot of like old stuff that we said, keep a stiff upper lip and be a man, that we crap on a lot, but that actually helped too. It's like, well, aspire at least to have that stiff upper lip, even though you're dealing with, your issues. Instead of now, it's just, you go on the internet, it's just trauma dumping everywhere.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Well, it's become a cultural phenomenon.
It's currency now at this point, and well, once anything becomes currency, there will always be counterfeiters too. So that's yet again, how much of this consent is manufactured too, how much of it is, the algorithm, the the algorithm pushing this stuff on us, and how much of that algorithm pushing stuff on us is intentional or just a result of our bad habits of consumption.
Really? Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Righty. So moving on, guys. Here we go.
Isn't it? So, what exactly is a mass psychosis? Simply put, it's an epidemic of madness. It occurs when a large portion of society loses touch with reality and descends into delusions. Now, you might be tempted to dismiss this as mere fiction, but history provides us with all too real examples. Consider the witch hunts that swept through America and Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. During this period, thousands of individuals, mostly women, were killed, not for any crimes they actually committed, but because they became scapegoats in societies gripped by collective madness. Francis Hill.
Yeah. More examples that he gives there. Then we can actually jump ahead a little bit in this video now.
Yeah, well,
so we just want to give a quick drill down into how this happened. What happened in this last
let's just
few
say
years?
communism. You want to talk about witch hunts and stuff like that.
Hey, there you go.
Communism killed way more people, and it happened real quick.
Boy, did it.
Whereas those witch hunts you're talking about hundreds of years and only thousands of people. Whereas we're talking about a few decades and hundreds of millions of people. So, you know, like,
well, the biggest example, really.
Shoof.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, let's look at the causes of mass psychosis now.
So, what causes a mass psychosis? To answer this, we need to first understand what drives an individual to madness. While there are many potential triggers, such as drug abuse, brain injuries, or other physical ailments, we are particularly interested in psychological, or psychogenic, causes. These are the most common culprits behind mass psychosis. The most prevalent psychogenic cause of psychosis is a flood of negative emotions, particularly fear or anxiety, that drives an individual into a state of panic. Now, imagine this panic spreading through a population like a contagious disease. That's the starting point of a mass psychosis. When in a state of panic, it's natural to seek relief. It's mentally and physically exhausting to remain in such a hyper-emotional state. While there are healthy ways to cope with panic, such as facing and overcoming the fear-inducing threat, another escape route is a psychotic break. Now, contrary to popular belief, a psychotic break isn't a descent into greater disorder. Instead, it's a reordering of one's experiential world. It blends fact and fiction, reality and delusions in a way that helps alleviate the feelings of panic. It's a coping mechanism, albeit a maladaptive one.
Yep.
Well, and you can induce a psychotic break, so then create the reason, the reasonable outcome in this person. Like, you know what, like imagine, like, you know, some horror movie, and, you know, some person, they've been messing with this person, you know, until they finally break down and go crazy, and they come in and it's like, actually, those were demons in your head, and we're here to save you. And it's like, oh man, like, there are demons and you're here to save us. I'm going to become part of your, like, order of brothers or whatever. And really they were just, you know, putting stuff in through the wall and messing with you and like rigging stuff like that. And then they break you down and break you down. And then the order that you're seking to find is something manufactured for you. You know, much like the vid that we experienced and the responses to that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the whole thing anymore, but, you know, we just went through that, and it was a panic. It's like, okay, something's happening. And there's a bunch of information going on, you know, left and right. And we start, you know, first it was, oh, you don't need masks. And then you need masks. And then you need many masks. And then
confused
and then, you know,
and washing our friggin' groceries when we got home. And yeah, so here I've actually found the part where they bring up totalitarianism right after the witches. So check this out, guys.
Think about the rise of totalitarianism in the 20th century. Millions of people embraced ideologies that, in hindsight, seem obviously destructive and delusional. Yet, at the time, entire nations fell under their spell. The results of a mass psychosis are nothing short of devastating. Jung studied this phenomenon extensively and observed that when a society succumbs to madness, its members become morally and spiritually inferior. They sink unconsciously to an inferior intellectual level, becoming more unreasonable, irresponsible, emotional, erratic, and unreliable. But perhaps most terrifying of all, Jung noted that crimes the individual alone could never stand are freely committed by the group. This explains how ordinarily moral people can participate in atrocities during times of mass psychosis.
Yeah.
What makes this phenomenon even more insidious is that those caught in its grip are often unaware of what's happening.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, well, it's a good reason for why people do what they do, but is it an excuse? No.
No.
It's a reason, and it's something that we can be mindful of to not participate in, but it's like you have to aspire to be continuously mindful of this, because when you're in it, you don't know.
Yes,
and you don't necessarily know that, like freaking out on your neighbor because, they're out in their front yard without the mask is a bad thing. You don't know because you're in it and you think, well, like, we're all going to die. Why can't you realize we're all going to die? You're killing my grandma.
Eyes of fear perspective. There it is. Yeah.
And it doesn't help when it's constantly pumped down your throat. And, there's a lot of other examples other than this most recent vid experience. But I think since this one was so globally effective and recent, it's worth mentioning, because it's like, well, look, like, we gave up our sovereignty as individuals. A lot of our countries gave up their own sovereignty. We
gave up free speech. We gave up a lot.
We gave up all of our money. Like, if you're poor, you gave up your money to the richest among us. If you're middle class, you gave your money to the richest among us. And we saw the greatest wealth transfer in human history ever. And now we're also seeing the greatest plunge into
authoritarianism.
Well, I was going to say illiteracy.
Oh, that too.
And education levels have just fallen. You don't see that kind of fall except for like really bad wartime things, when another country or something comes in and, and destroys all your schools. And yet still, they'll try to teach your kids. Now we got bad kids. Like, and it's not necessarily their fault. And it maybe not necessarily their parents' fault, but man, it's like, bad programming on top of bad programming on top of bad programming from people who think that they're your betters because they are the educated elite few.
Yep. Ninja Bat says, how not to panic. Step 1, don't believe government or mainstream media. Step 2, see step 1. That's good.
Step 3,
that's good.
Breathe and read step 1 again.
Okay, so let's learn now about the phases of mass panic. Check this out. Be rolling.
Silvano Arrietty, one of the 20th century's foremost authorities on schizophrenia, outlined the psychogenic steps that lead to madness. First, there's the phase of panic, where the individual starts perceiving things differently, becomes frightened, appears confused, and can't explain the strange occurrences they're experiencing. This is followed by what Arrietty calls the phase of psychotic insight. During this phase, the individual succeeds in putting things together by creating a pathological way of seeing reality. This allows them to explain their abnormal experiences. Arrietty calls it insight because the patient finally sees meaning in their experiences, but it's psychotic because it's based on delusions rather than a realistic understanding of the situation.
In essence, those meanings.
The delusions allow the panic-stricken individual to escape from the flood of negative emotions, but at the cost of losing touch with reality. As Arrietty puts it, a psychotic break can be viewed as an abnormal way of dealing with an extreme state of anxiety.
Okay. Now, this sets us up to understand how group madness manifests into totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Scale this up to a societal level. If a flood of negative emotions can trigger a psychotic break in a vulnerable individual, then a mass psychosis can result when a population of vulnerable individuals is driven into a state of panic by threats, real, imagined, or fabricated. But here's where it gets interesting, because delusions can take many forms, and madness can manifest in countless ways. The specific manner in which a mass psychosis unfolds will differ, based on the historical and cultural context of the affected society. In our modern era, one form of mass psychosis stands out as particularly threatening: the psychosis of totalitarianism. Arthur Virtuous defines totalitarianism as the modern phenomenon of total centralized state power, coupled with the obliteration of individual human rights.
There it is.
Yep.
So next, we'll look at the effects of totalitarianism and menticide. What is menticide? The sowing of fear. Creating waves of terror to create the mass psychosis.
What is it that was set in Dune? Fear is the mind killer. Menticide.
Damn.
Menticide, killing the mind through fear. I don't know.
That's great, dude. Yeah, that's awesome you brought that up. Yep. Yeah, Dune, great.
Since Dune's a big thing right now with their new show, so hey.
So yeah, let's go ahead and make sure I'm in the right spot here.
Right spot.
Manifest into totalitarianism. Yeah, we got that part. Okay. Here we go. Let's go.
20th century's preeminent scholars of totalitarianism describe it as an attempted transformation of human nature itself. But this transformation doesn't create a utopia. It turns sound minds into sick ones. As a Dutch medical doctor who studied the mental effects of totalitarianism observed, there is in fact much that is comparable between the strange reactions of the citizens of totalitarianism and their culture as a whole on the one hand, and the reactions of the sick schizophrenic on the other. The social transformation that unfolds under totalitarianism is built upon and sustained by delusions. Think about it. Only deluded individuals would regress to the childlike status of obedient and submissive subjects, handing over complete control of their lives to politicians and bureaucrats. Only a deluded ruling class would believe they possess the knowledge, wisdom, and acumen to completely control society in a top-down manner. And only under the spell of delusions would anyone believe that a society composed of power-hungry rulers and a psychologically regressed population could lead to anything other than mass suffering and social ruin, natural disasters.
Really. So that's a great point.
But, when you're part of, that educated minority elite, you don't really actually care about the other people more than just they're a means to your ends. You don't really care. Most of the time, I don't even think activists really care about who they're activising for. They don't.
Some
might they might care about the greater concept of it, but if the individual came up, if an individual for whatever group or whatever came up and needed a ride, but they were on the way to work and where they needed the ride is in the opposite way, they wouldn't stop and pick that person up and be like, no, I need to help you.
But we don't want to create blanket generalizations.
But I'm not gonna. That is the smallest percentage of people. I'm like that.
Activists is a large group of people that consider themselves activists, and they act in different ways.
I would say people in general too, but the activists they make the noise about it. But
we're getting on tangents here.
Anyway.
Yeah, because we're running a little bit long here, but we want to finish this out, guys. We got a couple of really good clips coming up here, so stay tuned. Something particularly hilarious from
but
Twitter
the point of
my
that
girlfriend
was basically the suffering ends up coming and happening and continuing because the people, those educated elite minority, don't care.
No,
they don't. They can't. They're removed.
That's right. They don't. Yeah. They can't empathize. They can't sympathize because they are not in the same situation. They have no experience of it,
which is kind of sad.
Yeah. So here, let's learn about menticide.
The mass psychosis of totalitarianism has been induced many times throughout history. As Just Mirlu explains in his book, The Rape of the Mind, it is simply a question of reorganizing and manipulating collective feelings in the proper way. The method by which the ruling elite accomplishes this is called menticide, which literally means killing of the mind. Mirlu describes it as an organized system of psychological intervention and judicial perversion through which a ruling class can imprint their own opportunistic thoughts upon the minds of those they plan to use and destroy. So, how does this process of menticide unfold? It begins with the sowing of fear, placing the population in a state of panic that primes them for a descent into delusionary beliefs. One particularly effective technique is the use of waves of terror. Under this method, periods of intense fear-mongering are interspersed with periods of calm. But each period of calm is followed by an even more intense spell of fear.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. Well,
what do you guys think?
Yeah, you have any examples?
Throw your thoughts in the comments. Yeah, I'd love to see what y'all think.
Well, it's either the world's coming to an end, or it's humans' fault, or the fascists are going to win, and it's the capitalist fault, or the institutions are completely corrupted and it's the communists' fault.
This or that thing outside of me for sure.
And then things are good again. Our side won for a little bit and then we're fine,
Yeah. Ninja Bet says children plus public education equals activism.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. No longer do we teach our kids to be good little consumers and work in the factory. It's be good little activists.
Obedient, acquiescent followers of the group. Activists for this thing that we say is of course, when the government and major corporations are supporting your activism, you got to wonder if you are not being played. So that was from the short documentary. It's just a 21-minute documentary by Mr. Brain, How Mass Psychosis Controls Entire Populations. Check that out. Link is in the description. Now we're going to move on, and just a few minutes of this one, but we're going to learn about Orwell's warning, the insidious nature of political language. We're going to learn about doublethink and doublespeak now, and how we can frame things in incongruous ways to manipulate. So let's go ahead and start this off. Ready and rolling.
Imagine waking up in a world where words no longer mean what they appear to. A place where language, the very tool we use to communicate and understand reality, is twisted to obscure truth and manipulate thoughts. This unsettling scenario is not a dystopian fiction, but a reality shaped by doublespeak, a deliberate distortion of language to deceive and control.
Yep. Okay, so that's just the little intro. So what is doublespeak? What is doublethink?
Doublespeak should not be confused with doublethink. Doublethink is a term from George Orwell's 1984 novel. Doublethink is a process of indoctrination in which subjects are expected to simultaneously accept two conflicting beliefs as true, often at odds with their own memory or sense of reality. Doublespeak, on the other hand, is language that seems benign and informative, but is actually specifically designed to confuse the listener or distort our perception of reality. Doublespeak is language that may try to make something immoral or negative appear good and acceptable, or at least not as bad as it seems. William Lutz defines doublespeak as follows. Doublespeak is language that pretends to communicate but really doesn't. It is language that makes the bad seem good, the negative appear positive, the unpleasant appear attractive, or at least tolerable.
And we're seeing a lot of that in our culture as of late, aren't we? A lot of the unpleasant being made to be attractive or at least tolerable, or even something that you should support with some good activism
or if
behind it.
It's not that bad.
The bad seem good, the negative appear positive. So it's pretend to communicate, but it really doesn't. It's more about obfuscation and manipulation, and it can cause us to be under the spell of doublethink, where we can believe two opposing ideas at the same time, which is really crazy, but you see a lot of that happening.
A really good example is Queers for Palestine. How, like, if it's not for the, the manufactured ability, the ability that has been preyed upon for your brain to hold two conflicting ideas, it's like, well, Palestine don't like the queers. We'll just put it that way. And
Palestinian people, nor the warlords that control them, they really do not like homosexuals at all. It's disturbing. We did an episode on this previously, and we covered Ayaan Hirsi Ali, among others. Look back in past episodes to find that, guys.
Or here's another one that gets me. It's a thought-terminating cliche. It is reproductive health care, and they're using that, like it's abortion. They're talking about abortion, just to be clear with it, but reproductive rights, where it's like, well, there's nothing reproductive about that. You're making it sound like,
Remember the mostly peaceful protests?
Oh, yeah, that's another mostly peaceful protest. Yeah. A fiery but mostly peaceful protest.
That was an actual headline.
Oh, yeah, it was this dude standing there, and there was like a Denny's burning behind him or something. And he's just like, a fiery but mostly peaceful protest. And it's just like, bro.
Yep. So here's another really short clip, guys. So let's continue on with this subject.
Furthermore, doublespeak is language that avoids or shifts responsibility, language that is at variance with its real or purported meaning.
Here we go.
It is language which seems to communicate with listeners but deceives them. It is language which appears to describe a reality but actually distorts it. According to William Lutz, doublespeak is language that conceals or prevents thought. Rather than extending thought, doublespeak limits it.
Doublespeak is language designed to evade responsibility, make the unpleasant appear pleasant, the unattractive appear attractive. Basically, it's language that pretends to communicate but really doesn't. It is language designed to mislead while pretending not to.
That's exactly right. Sophistry.
Yep. But yeah, like, we're right back around to the old, to old Greek days. We got a bunch of people who are just really good at saying a bunch of bullshit, and I'm using that as an actual, a scholarly term, bullshit, salience without truth. And that's where we're at right now. Except we're in like hyper salience, and we've almost made truth painful. Like we've conditioned people that if they look at truth or anything, they have a physical, visceral response deep in their guts that make them not want to look into it. You know, I was watching.
If it challenges your already held belief,
well,
especially, you will turn off.
Well, and even beyond that, even if you know, like just looking into how bad it actually is gives you a really bad feeling. Like this is kind of related, but I want to bring it up as
it also ultimately sets you free once you get through that process. On
Valuetainment, so Patrick Bet-David's podcast, he was interviewing a woman who was, you know, groomed in a elite sex like ring with, you know, like the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and like that level. And then one of the men that was grooming her and training her used a technique where he'd harm her. He would strangle her and be like, and then look at her and be like, okay, what do you feel when you see my face? So if she ever saw his face or had to point at the face, it would give her discomfort.
Wow.
That's being done to us with like, well, don't look into the truth because, you know, like it's painful and we're going to make it really painful every time. We're going to call you a misinformationist and a Nazi and or whatever we can call you. So if you dare, like even we don't even have to call you. You've just seen other people called that. If you dare do that, now you're going to get a response that keeps you from clicking further and looking further into it. It's sick, but it's effective. Like these people, like they can do it because it works, and there's a lot of science behind it. Like we just need to learn it so we can inoculate ourselves to it. You know.
Well put. Yep. So jumping ahead, guys. Let's go.
Basically, doublespeak does not always overtly lie or conceal a reality. Rather, it tends to frame it in a way that makes it appear differently than it actually is.
Framing reality.
Basic to doublespeak is incongruity. The incongruity between what is said or left unsaid and what really is. It is the incongruity between the word and the referent, between seem and be, between the essential function of language, communication, and what doublespeak does: mislead, distort, deceive, inflate, circumvent, obfuscate.
Okay.
William Lutz.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we can look at the 4 types of doublespeak now. Here they are: euphemism, jargon, gobbledygook, or inflated language. So euphemism is using mild or vague terms to mask harsh or unpleasant realities. Jargon, specialized language that can confuse or exclude those not familiar with a particular field, make you seem smart and confused. Gobbledygook, complex, convoluted language often found in official documents. This is also another way to confuse and befuddle. Inflated language, using God, do we ever see good examples of gobbledygook from modern politicians?
Dude, like I very regularly am reading through different, you know, bills and amendments and other stuff like that. And,
full of it.
Oh yeah, it's just nothing but gobbledygook.
Yeah, dude. You know, inflated language, using grandiose words to make something appear more significant than it actually is. That's another technique. So all these are really a big part of what is known as sophistry, according to the Greeks.
Yeah.
Using seeming sophisticated in order to make an argument and win a debate, even though you might be completely lying and full of it. It's a great, powerful technique.
And if you're really good at it, you can actually say one thing that doesn't make any sense to the uninitiated while you're in the same words at the same exact time, telling the people who are initiated into what it is. You know, say like with you know, like lingoism and stuff like that, using different lingo doesn't make sense to other people, but the people who are in on it know what you're saying. So you can simultaneously tell the truth to the people that you want to tell it to, while or at least tell the message to the people you want to, while other people won't even know. They'll just be like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, that sounds great. Like what, everybody should be included. And, you know, like, I don't want to be a racist. So like, yeah, let's make it diverse and, you know, equity, that sounds like equality. So that's fine. Yeah. Whereas like the people who are initiated know exactly what each one of those terms mean.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let's look at some good examples of this now.
Yeah.
So let's jump on over here to X.
Look at that face.
And yeah, this is Eric Doherty's page. I don't really know the guy, but I looked up this clip and found it here. So thank you, Eric. Check it out, guys. This link is in the description.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Except
no
Hunter Biden.
one is above the law.
No
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody
is above the law.
No one is above the law. No one is above the law.
Especially during the dozens of prosecutions against President-elect Donald Trump.
All these people are above the law.
No one is 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 above the law.
It's Hunter Biden. There he is. Hunter Biden can do no wrong. Well, he's got like 20 or 12 hours from this point to go do as much cocaine as he can.
What do you say?
Okay, yeah. So
son of a bitch.
Okay,
yeah. Well, so the funny thing with that is he was pardoned not just for the gun crime, which I think was kind of stupid because that's self-incrimination on those things. And then the tax stuff, well, yeah, whatever. But it was also everything back to 2014. And then he had a 12-hour leeway, like from when he was pardoned to whenever. And that was like, flush all the paperwork.
Why that specific 11-year mark?
Oh, Burisma?
Oh, because he worked for the oil giants, Ukrainian oil giant.
Well, and then all the
Burisma.
crap he was doing in China.
He was on the board of that company and getting paid $50,000 a month on the board of this company while having no experience in this sector at all.
Not to mention all the sex trafficking, because if those prostitutes that he was banging,
there's a number of companies.
If he took them over state line or out of the country, that's technically sex trafficking. So there's those, and it probably also has to do is like how long have you had that laptop, Hunter?
Yeah.
Like what in there? How far back does it go? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So let's get on to this. So yeah, we're probably going to do a future episode on this at some point too. We might as well. There's so much to that story, and more on that now. Actually, Biden's saying that. Remember how he said he was not going to pardon his son after the conviction. He wouldn't pardon his son at all. He was going to stand by the jury and the Justice Department. He was not going to interfere. This would have been a very well. It seemed like he was trying to make a gesture to the American public that he is an honest individual. All of a sudden, he went back on that, possibly because Donald Trump won, and now Kamala Harris can no longer pardon Biden once she gets in office, because that wouldn't be as bad in public perception, if Kamala did it after she had won. Biden doing it, it's kind of fishy, and he's not looking as honorable and honest Joe as he wanted to portray.
Frankly, if he just came out in the beginning and was like, no, I'm going to pardon my son, he's my son, and any one of you guys would do the same, it would have been like, oh, okay. Yeah,
but
all right.
if there was...
But then it's like, no, we're not going to do it.
Where, the big guy in the emails that were found on Hunter's
10
laptop.
mil for the big guy?
If money really wasn't going to the Biden family from Hunter, and Hunter was not getting favorable positions in these companies because of his vice president father, okay, that's all well and good. If he was... that's a pretty darn big deal, and so he would be pardoning himself as well, wouldn't he? And so why this most sweeping pardon, one of the most sweeping pardons we've ever seen? It's actually even more sweeping.
I think
it's actually more sweeping than the pardon of Nixon. So let's look at this clip now, guys. Let's go.
Presidential promise to put the law before a family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Major commitment from the president, accepting the outcome of the trial and also pledging not to pardon his son.
So the challenge for him is really to continue to live up to his values when it was really personal, and he did that today.
It seems like a pretty normal, straightforward answer, but it takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial, what we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene.
This goes on. We've just watched 55 seconds. Let's watch what happens when we go to the center, because this is 9 minutes
And we've
long.
been saying that Trump's not above the law, Hunter Biden's not above the law, no one is above the law. And it is amazing to see the stark contrast between how Democrats handled today and how Republicans handled this whole thing over the last couple of weeks.
For years, these conservatives have been crowing about a politicized Justice Department, Biden politicizing it, and so on. What happened today? The Justice Department convicted the president's own son, his only living son. You heard the president say he would accept the outcome of the case. I know no other word for that, but presidential.
Wow. And not only that, this actually stops Donald Trump from pardoning Hunter on his first day to throw a big wrench in that story that Trump was going to be a dictator on day one, because the media has taken that statement seriously that he obviously made in
You know what Trump should do? He should pardon Joe Biden on day one for whatever he may have done.
That's what he was going to do.
Well, not
now,
Hunter, but Joe Biden himself.
Biden. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh,
because
like
Joe's Joe's never going to see trial. He's going to die before a trial gets done. He's old. You know, like I'm not wishing him any, like don't like think like I'm wishing him ill or anything, but no, he's old. The best thing would be like, oh, Joe Biden is, you know, like pardon him for like way more time. Like go back to when he was like a senator, like pardon him for all that stuff, because it's like, well, you can't try a man after he's dead. So it'd be hilarious. They'd make it bigger and better. He's like, well, they said the Hunter Biden was the biggest pardon ever. Well, my pardon for Joe Biden was even bigger. You know, that would be very on brand. That would be
I
hilarious.
remember when Trump said he could have gone after Clinton. He never did.
Yeah,
he didn't think that would be right to go after a former president's wife and someone that had also run for president.
But well, not
with
just,
lawfare, like came after him.
Yeah, well, she was a functioning politician that had responsibilities and caused some problems.
Yeah. So you had mentioned how there was a few hours on that pardon. There was like future.
Yeah, future
so
pardoning.
Not just pardon for the past, but future pardoning for like the next, like 4 hours or whenever it was.
It was
6
whatever,
hours
midnight of that day. So it was like till midnight of that day. Well, so he had hours. In all honesty, the non-conspiracy theorist to me is going to say probably just because it matches up for the legal paperwork a little bit better, because the end of the day, you know, the shifting into the next day.
If that's necessary.
But the conspiracy theorist to me thinks that it was probably so some documents could be flushed or destroyed or other things, and any last little bit of stuff could be taken out.
Close down your overseas bank accounts with any money trails.
Yeah, you know, bleach bit your computers, go online and, you know, or maybe like order the hit on some people.
Or this is what,
you know,
or he was doing this. And we're going to keep the sound off on this one just because there's some music in the background. But check it out, guys.
Oh, yeah.
There he is.
Oh, yeah.
There he is.
Oh, God. No, Hunter, no. Oh, no.
Okay, so that's it. That's the end. And you know, it's
for everybody listening, it was Elmo.
That's exactly what he was doing.
Smoking bongs and doing rails.
Oh yeah,
and then
getting progressively
doing something untoward towards a stuffed animal, stuffed bunny, and then just acting like a hooligan, and then pointing guns at people, and then pointing guns at himself, and then eventually
and everyone telling him no.
Yeah, and you know, I hope Hunter stays alive and doesn't unalive himself, or somebody else doesn't do it. He should live a very long time, and yeah, that's the best I can say about him. I won't say I feel bad for the dude, but if I had a dad like Joe, I don't know if I would end up any better. So,
well, we should, I think, have compassion for even those with whom we
disagree. Dude, he should write a tell-all book.
Yeah.
Like, now that he's been pardoned, you know, like how OJ wrote a book, you know, that was like, well, if I did it, I would do it like this.
The feel for is definitely better than to hate, at least. Well, yeah, he was talking about writing a book, and that might be another reason why they needed to make sure they pardoned his ass for the last 10 years.
I'm sure he's bitter, like, because like some of the stuff I've seen in like the text messages and stuff that like have disappeared from the internet, but when they first came out and all that stuff, he was mad. He was mad at getting taken advantage of by the whole freaking family and being like, you know, basically being the mule.
He was not the favorite son.
He wasn't the favorite son, and all of his money was being taken by the family. Yep. And, you know, and if you read the diary, you know what he was doing to the daughter, what Biden Sr. was doing to the daughter, according to the daughter.
In her own
in her
diary.
own journal. And they're like, it wasn't her journal. I'm like, well, people went to jail for selling that journal. So that means it was her journal.
She has not denied it either. There's no
there was no denying it. Yeah, but
slander or anything going on.
Yeah, and the media says, oh, well, Biden is not nearly as scandalous as Trump. I'm like, Biden's way more scandalous. They had to make stuff up about Trump.
Boy. He's the one that's actually on record saying very racist stuff.
Yeah. Now, mind you, Trump, yes, he is a blowhard. He's a businessman, and he likes really beautiful women, and he's been divorced a few times. But, I mean, like, comparatively, from everything that came off of that laptop, and plus, everything.
Well, the conversation that last night Tim Pool and Cenk Uygur were having on Timcast IRL, I think that Cenk made a great point where Cenk, I don't know. I think
Cenk. It's Cenk.
Okay. So he said that it's no longer like the right versus the left or Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives. It's actually now populists versus the establishment.
Yeah.
I think that's a super valid point because the sides are changing and we're in the middle of a massive phase shift is what it feels like. And let's actually make sure that we aim this phase shift in a desirable direction for one and all.
Well, we got to
encourage the best of our species.
We got to keep working, keep doing the Lord's work.
Amen.
Keep going, even though our side, for whatever that is, seems to have won or is winning. Now we need to stay on it, dude.
Yeah, we got to change this world from the inside out.
Again.
We got to stay on top of it. That's right. We cannot become the evil again.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say we should have a revolution, but then it's also very likely that we wouldn't be able to uphold the new system that we put in place because we have to live up to the values. We have to be the virtuous beings that we wish to see in this world. We have to popularize this way of being. We have to truly take this on as a posture, an orientation towards life of lovingness, forgiveness, compassion, consideration, a willingness to work together, to compromise and find agreement, to reach conciliation. We have to do this. We can't expect someone else out there to do it for us. We have to watch these representatives like hawks, make sure that Trump and everyone that he hires into his administration does the work that we want them to do, hold them accountable when they are not. Same for the Democrats. It's the same old game. It's the people versus the oligarchy. It always has been, and let's hope it will not always be. Let's hope that our species continues to evolve, our social acuity and capacity for working together develops and is cultivated by ever more enlightened, kind, loving, and peaceful individuals willing to have those hard conversations, even with those with whom they disagree. We were talking about this on the phone the other day. The Socratic method is to look at refutations or challenges to your beliefs as acts of kindness. That's the disposition. That's the orientation or posture to take when we're trying to work something out with somebody else, rather than just a debate where we're opposing each other. We can think of this as a side-by-side endeavor, and we can frame that, our perception of what's going on in that event, that way in our minds. That will influence the person that we are talking with. They will realize that we're not being combative, that we're really trying to figure it out, and we're basically offering a meeting of the minds. Let's work together. Let's use our group consciousness, our collective intelligence to figure this thing out together. Let's stop being so friggin' certain all the time. We're all so certain. And if we just let go of that certainty when we're a little bit more open, we could narrow down into the best solutions to solve the great problems that face our species in this time of meaning crisis. So that's it, fam. We're going to change this world from the inside out. Thank you so much for being here with us. Let's dance our way out, brother. Let's go. Oh, yeah. This is it, fam.
Oh, yeah.
The truth.
Well, I've been DJ.
I've been Chris. We will see you next time.